Before we journey into understanding our role as architects of the future, let me present three fundamental truths that you must learn and carry home today. 1. Yoruba is not in the name, but in our cultural identity. The essence lies in refining this essence through actions that reflect our heritage. 2. Our future depends on refocusing attention from what we are not to what we must become. Masters of intelligent productivity, collaborative excellence, and sustainable innovation. And 3. The next 200 years belong to those who understand that being Yoruba means being builders of cities, creators of systems, and architects of sustainable prosperity rooted in our profound knowledge traditions. Who we are, the foundational elements of Yoruba identity. To understand our path forward, we must first understand who we are. Drawing from the profound insights shared in our Yoruba Historical Conversations program at Dawncommission, particularly Professor Banji Akintoye's illuminating lectures on our heritage, let me present these foundational elements of Yoruba identity that must guide our youth today. We are custodians of profound knowledge systems. The Yoruba are not just people of culture. We are custodians of deep, sophisticated knowledge systems. Our view is rich in philosophy, metaphysics, and social framework that remain relevant in today's complex world. In one edition of our Yoruba Historical Conversation, Dr. Decker, an associate professor of history, Osun State University, a powerful lecture, the Yoruba concept of poverty, revealing the profound depth of our indigenous understanding. His insights remind us that Yoruba thought goes far beyond surface level interpretation. It is layered, reflective, and deep humanistic. At the heart of this world concept as destiny, but encompassing much more. Ori is a metaphysical framework that combines existence, identity, and sense of being. It determines a person's life path, but it is not deterministic. While someone may come to earth with a good Ori, that alone is not enough. Yoruba wisdom teaches that without Iwa, one's character, even the best Ori, can be destroyed. Iwa, the ethical dimension of life, is what shapes destiny on earth. It includes behavior and traits like Iwa Otito, truthfulness, Iwa Pele, gentle character, Iwa Ole, laziness, Iwa Buruku, bad conduct. These are not just moral labels, they are forces that interact with you. In Yoruba thought, has many dimensions. Imo, knowledge, oye, understanding, alafia, peace of mind, itelorun, contentment, itunu, inner rest, ireti, hope, igbagbo, faith, omo, children, ipa, ability, stroke, capacity. Even money, owo, revered in the modern world, is seen only as a segment of wealth, not its totality, but merely the beginning of it. Worldview teaches us that true progress begins with honest self-awareness. It is neither defeatist nor utopian. It is deeply human, eternally relevant, and radically empowering. It teaches us that understanding our inadequacies becomes the catalyst for meaningful action and growth. We are a people defined by intelligent productivity. The Yoruba concept of work transcends mere labor. It embodies intelligent productivity rooted in our cultural DNA. When we recited the Shelogun in primary school, we were not just learning poetry. We were internalizing a fundamental truth about our identity. As J.F. Odunjo taught us, work is the antidote to poverty. But more importantly, work in the Yoruba context is productivity that creates value for both the individual and society. Our forefathers understood that work is not just about earning money, it is about creating reference points that elevate both worker and the community. The story of Yesufu Ojewumi, traveled from Ibadan to Lagos in the early 1900s, exemplifies this principle. Starting as a porter carrying meat on his head in Oyigbo market, he eventually built a transportation empire. His success gave birth to that proverb of saying, "Ẹni tí kò lè ṣe bí Adégbọrọ̀ lọ́jà ọba." This ethos teaches us that whatever we do as good work becomes the foundation for honor and societal contribution. Your work becomes your worth, and your productivity speaks for your character. The industrious nature that Clapperton documented was not mere physical labor, but intelligent productivity, the ability to see opportunity where others see obstacles, to create wealth where others capacity. Our ancestors didn't. They created agricultural systems that supported thriving urban centers. That was rare in medieval Africa. They understood that prosperity comes from systematic thinking, collaborative efforts, and sustained excellence. We are builders of cities and civilizations. As revealed in Professor Banji Akitoye's lectures, when Portuguese explorers arrived at our shores in 1533, they were stunned. What they found was not a scattered collection of villages, but Ijebu-Ode, a thriving walled city already 400 years old. Accident. It was evidence of deliberate civilization. And it was not. Our cities, Ife, Ketu, Ilarogun, Ile, and many others were not colonial creations. They were created by our own people through our own ingenuity and for our own. Of this civilization was the Agboile, the large multi-family compound that housed 50 to 60 families in a single cohesive structure. These were not chaotic shelters. They were carefully constructed, technologically advanced spaces built with bulldozers or cranes. Only the collective wisdom and the will of the people. In every Yoruba town and city, this was the way of life. Our people did not live with the mentality of me and my wife and my children. That was never the Yoruba way. Instead, we built communities, living systems of shared labor, shared learning, and shared love. Our homes were not just dwellings. They were social and spiritual infrastructures, binding generations together under the same roof and vision. For this foundation emerged remarkable innovations, systems like Owe and Aro, where individuals or groups could call for collective farming efforts, receiving support in exchange for food, music, and companionship. These were not just economic tools, they were embodiments of what we now call socialized productivity. Even in the 19th century, when most cities were being carved out by colonial interests, the Yoruba were still building cities like Abeokuta, Shagamu, Okeodon, Okeagbe. Ayede emerged not from European blueprints, but from Yoruba resilience, driven mostly by young men and women. Ibadan, for instance, was born from the courage and creativity of displaced youth who turned a small village into a dynamic metropolis, a center for commerce, scholarship, and opportunity. They were not passive citizens, they were active builders of cities, systems, and futures. The Yorubas, as masters of collaborative economics, the Yoruba economy was never built on individualism, never. It thrived and still thrives on collaboration, mutual trust, and collective discipline. Long before the rise of modern banks or microfinance institutions, our women had pioneered powerful financial systems that the Western world will only later attempt to redefine. Take the Shishu system, for example. Far more than a simple savings cooperative club, It was and remains a sophisticated financial institution grounded in trust, discipline, and community accountability. Through regular contributions, rotating disbursements, and strict participation rules, Yoruba women created a grassroots economic engine that lifted entire households and communities out of poverty. If you are late, you are out. If you default, you are replaced. This was not harshness, it was responsibilities. The rules of history were strict because the stakes were very high. It demanded timeliness, reliability, and integrity, and rewarded participants with access to capital and financial growth. It democratized wealth creation before the world even coined the term. Even in times when currency was scarce, our fathers found innovative alternatives. In Owu, which is wool, for instance, participants used bundles of yarn, YARN, as a form of currency, demonstrating not just economic creativity, but adaptive thinking. They understood that wealth wasn't just in money, it was in materials, network, and shared efforts. Our women built the commercial backbone of Yoruba civilization. They were not just market women, they were economic strategists, creating and sustaining sophisticated systems of trade and finance that spanned cities and even crossed continental boundaries. Yoruba women were among the greatest traders in Africa, reaching as far as the Upper Nile in present-day southern Sudan. This collaborative lifestyle was deeply economic. In Yoruba land, a person's success was not measured by what they accumulated alone, but by how many others they uplifted along the way. That spirit birthed systems that were structured, dependable, economic arrangements rooted in the belief that we are stronger together. We are a people of democratic values. For 1,000 years since the founding of Ife, the Yoruba have practiced forms of participatory governance rooted in justice, accountability, and the people's will. Our ancestors understood that leadership must be earned and checked, not imposed. They built institutions that balance power, encouraged free expression, and upheld justice through spiritual and communal obligations. The Ogboni institution, for instance, represented a sophisticated system of checks and balances. Even the most powerful among them swore fearful oaths of honesty and impartiality. Kings ruled, but did not legislate. Councils of elders and titled chiefs legislated, but laws were only announced in the king's name after consensus. This was a governance system anchored on checks and balances in both spiritual and social responsibility. Only formal institutions that protected the people's voice. Freedom of speech was institutionalized through cultural festivals, and public gatherings were designed as platforms for open criticism, structured yet fearless. During such events, citizens, including the youth, were encouraged to voice grievances, challenge authority, and mock even the king without fear of punishment. In Ibadan, during the reign of Olubadan Kubiowu, the youth once sang a song that mocked their king, claiming he has scrotal lymphedema. Kubiowu has swollen testicles, one testicle bigger than the other. Of course, the king suffered no such ailment. It was a satire. This tradition wasn't born of malice, but served to remind leaders of their humanity, their fallibility, and their duty to serve. In Yoruba society, speech was not only protected, it was respected. As much as freedom of speech was encouraged, they also understood the power of the tongue. We Yoruba are men and women of words, not just words, but words of wisdom. Hence, Oro Siso, the art of thoughtful speech, is a cornerstone of the Omoluabi ethos. To speak is not merely to talk, but to shape minds, build peace, and progress. That's why I digress for a second. That's why I shuddered when I saw the video of the young lady pointing fingers at someone old enough to be her grandfather at Ojude Oba last week. And I saw a lot of people jumping in and trying to back her up. I said, well, That is not the Yoruba that I know. This deep democratic spirit carried forward into modern politics. In the 1950s, as colonial rule gave way to self-governance, Yoruba towns and cities conducted some of the most transparent elections on the continent. Even the most revered leaders were held accountable at the ballot box. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, despite his towering achievements in education and social welfare, lost elections in his own hometown. In Ibadan, he was consistently defeated by Chief Adegoke Adelabu, whose charisma and connection to the people made him a political force. In our land, there was no attempt to use government power to overturn or manipulate the will of the people. That is the Yoruba. These foundational elements, our knowledge systems, work ethic, urban ingenuity and collaborative economy, and democratic values are not just relics of a proud past. They are blueprints for our collective future. To move forward, we must reclaim and reapply these truths and cultural identity, not sentimentally, but strategically. Because if this is who we are, then we already have what it takes to confront the present. And that brings us to where we now stand, a moment in our history where every challenge we face must be reimagined as a strategic opportunity. Today's challenges equals tomorrow's opportunities. Now that we understand who we are, the foundations of our identity, let us examine where we stand today. Understanding our current position requires seeing beyond surface level challenges to identity that structural opportunities they create. Rather than viewing difficulties as reasons for despair, we must recognize them as the very conditions that will drive our transformation. We stand at a unique historical convergence. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs reports projects that by 2030, which is about 6 years away, approximately 92 million jobs may be displaced by automation, but 170 million new roles will emerge, which is a net gain of 78 million jobs globally. However, nearly 40% of core skills required for most jobs will change, and 59% of workers will need reskilling. Africa's demographic trajectory positions us uniquely within this global shift. By 2050, the continent will contribute 57% of global population growth, adding 1.4 billion people. Sub-Saharan Africa population will double, with 60% under 25 years old. Strong, vibrant, and full of potential. Africa's working age population will reach 62% of the total, creating an unprecedented opportunity for economic transformation. In southwest Nigeria, Yoruba land, over 60% of our population is already under 35. This presents a critical question. Will this youthful population become a blessing or a burden, an economic time bomb or a creative explosion? The answer depends entirely on how we position ourselves in this competitive demography. Unfortunately, many of our youth have become disconnected from the work ethic, collaborative spirit, and innovative thinking that made our ancestors great. This disconnection manifests as preference for shortcuts over productivity, individual success over communal development, and consumption over. However, this disconnection creates a unique opportunity for conscious reconnection. Think about it. Every young person who deliberately reclaims Yoruba values of work, ethics, excellence, collaboration, and innovation becomes a catalyst for broader cultural renewal. The absence of cultural grounding in one generation can become the driving force for its restoration in the next. Yours is the generation called to lead that restoration. Our cities today face significant challenges in things like housing, infrastructure, and planning. But when we view these problems through the lens of our heritage, we begin to see not obstacles, but opportunities. In other words, in another edition of Yoruba Historical Conversation, Dr. Joseph Adediran Adediji, who in his book Ecological Urbanism of Yoruba Cities in Nigeria, presented a compelling framework for traditional Yoruba urbanization, both what it was and what it should be today. He described how our ancestors designed urban spaces using 3 integrated zones: the core areas with indigenous dwellings, intermediate transitional zones, and suburban developments. Most importantly, they understood urban space, not just buildings, is the true foundation of society. We are the descendants of people who built sophisticated urban centers without modern machinery. People who practice what is now called ecological urbanism, long before it became a global sustainability concept. Our traditional homes featured utilitarian gardens with medicinal and dietary plants. These gardens were not just functional, they were collaborative family spaces that nurtured social unity, kinship ties, and between human settlements and nature. Our ancestors also allowed foreign settlers, but crucially, they remained the architects and designers of their own spaces. A contemporary parallel is Dubai, a place where indigenous people retained early ownership of urban development and controlled how their land was utilized. This is part of why, similar to ancient Yoruba settlements, modern Dubai has no slums. Development was strategic, not imposed. The current housing crisis then is not a death sentence, it is a doorway. It offers us the opportunity to revive ecological principles and social design. Rather than imitate Western planning models that marginalize green spaces and fragment community life, we can lead the world in sustainable, culturally rooted urbanism. High unemployment and economic inequality present challenges, but they also create opportunities for innovation. Our ancestors created economic systems that ensured widespread prosperity through collaborative models. The Isuzu system, cooperative farming arrangements, and communal economic activities can be modernized and scaled to address contemporary challenges. The absence of adequate formal employment becomes the driving force for entrepreneurial innovation. A shining example of this is Wemimo Abe, a young Yoruba innovator who reimagined the Shishu concept for the digital age. Drawing on this indigenous financial model, he co-founded a fintech company in the US that now serves thousands, helping underserved communities access credit and build wealth. Recognized by Forbes as one of the world's most promising startups, his company has projected Yoruba ingenuity onto the global stage, turning ancestral wisdom into 21st century value. So through entrepreneurs like Wemimo, we see that tradition is not a burden of the past, but a blueprint for the future. I'm trying to skip to the end. Now, the marginalization of traditional medicinal plants and ecological wisdom has created a gap in mainstream research. But this very gap is where our greatest opportunity lies. We can take advantage of advancements in biotech to pioneer pharmaceutical discovery and regenerative agriculture by returning to our roots. Yoruba land can become a global leader in sustainable development, not by imitating others, but by reactivating the genius that has always been ours. The role of Yoruba youth is not merely to preserve tradition, but to innovate within our cultural framework, to address contemporary challenges and create tomorrow's solutions. This requires understanding that true development stems not from shallow nationalism, but from creativity and innovation grounded in empirical and epistemic scientific endeavors that improve the living standards of people we culturally identify with. Yoruba youth must establish Yoruba as the language of global digital commerce and innovation. You must lead the digital codification of Yoruba language and culture. With the rapid evolution of AI, the task of ensuring Yoruba is comprehensively represented on global digital platforms rests on your shoulders. This involves building Yoruba capabilities into AI systems, creating digital educational content, and developing business applications in Yoruba. The goal is not mere preservation, but cultural leadership. Positioning Yoruba heritage as a global point of interest and inspirations. When Wemimo domesticated the issue concept into a startup recognized by Forbes, he demonstrated how traditional wisdom can create global value. The standardization of Yoruba orthography presents a transformative opportunity. Scholars like the revered Professor Ayo Bangboshe have laid essential foundations, while cultural champions like Chief Adedayo Alao, the publisher of Alaroye, with doubles as the founder of Yoruba World Center with young minds at the Yoruba Wikimedia Foundation, continue to build on this foundation. Beyond the digital space, Yoruba youth must also rise as visionary builders of cities, urban environments that embody our aesthetics, values, and communal spirit. This calls for a shift from scattered private developments to coordinated master planned estates rooted in the principles of our communal efforts. As Dr. Joseph's research revealed, in place of ornamental landscaping, our cities should cultivate purposeful greenery gardens. Public spaces must be designed to nurture such collaboration. We must shift away from our current conservative mindset that views land merely as a source of immediate profits and quick returns. Very important. I'm drawing to a close. There's a particular example good. So rather than just sell your land because you've got the highest bidder money, I'll give you an example of the 99-year leasehold granted on the piece of land where Western House sits today. It expired a few years ago, and the owners of the building, Wema Board, had to approach the owning family to renegotiate a new leasehold. That is a fortune that could have been forfeited had the older generations of the family sold the land instead of leasing it. They will have spent the money leaving the future generation in poverty. You must step forward as designers and developers of tomorrow's Yoruba cities. Our political heritage of balanced governance, participatory decision-making, and accountability provides models for enhancing modern democratic systems. Youth must create technologies that enhance transparency in governance, build digital platforms for civic engagement rooted in traditional values, and advocate for reforms that blend traditional wisdom with modern ideals. The Agbole model provides a framework for sustainability communal living. Youth can reimagine it through co-housing developments, community-driven social enterprises, and shared ownership models. Dawncommission, as I close. Our institutional framework for development. I'm not just placing all these responsibilities over the years from our base on the 10th floor of Cocoa House in Dubai. We have made and continue to make deliberate efforts to put our region on this path. The Dawn Commission stands as the institutional embodiment of strategic thinking around regional development. As a think tank, committed to fostering integration among all stakeholders across the 6 Southwest states, Dawn demonstrates how systematic, collaborative, and forward-looking approaches can effectively confront challenges. Our 5 development pillars, which include homeland affairs, advocates, and heritage preservation, while promoting practical development. The Western Nigerian Security Network, Amotekun, exemplifies this. It came from our desk. Our Yoruba Historical Conversation Program, which has featured scholars like Professor Awe, Akintoye, Toladeni, and Ashiwaju, demonstrates how cultural knowledge can inform development. Through our weekly Akikonju publication, we promote the Omoluabi ethos by highlighting individuals who embody these values. Our diaspora engagement includes active partnerships with Egbe Omo Yoruba North America and organizations in South Africa, Germany, and even Benin Republic, demonstrating how cultural identity can create economic and development opportunities. We are currently developing the Community-Led Development Toolkit, called it, with the ARA, Growth and Development Foundation in Osun State. This toolkit helps communities detect their assets, map stakeholders, and create strategic roadmaps for development. Finally, imagine Yoruba land 200 years from now, a region of cities as sophisticated as Dubai, yet deeply grounded in Yoruba aesthetics and community values. Financial systems that compete globally but remain inspired by the cooperative spirit of Ishishu. The future will not build itself. It demands that today's youth become the architects of tomorrow's legacy. It calls for a cultural and developmental renaissance that not only honors the genius of our ancestors, but also expands the vision through the tools of our time. The long-term objective is clear: to position the Yoruba people as global leaders by aligning our cultural strengths with modern innovation. The long-term goal is to position the Yoruba people as global leaders with modern innovation, global leaders, not just local champions. So this call is also not a romanticism with the name Yoruba. We can choose to call ourselves any name we want. Rather, this is a call to embrace who we are and to use our cultural identity and values to shape the world around us. Yoruba could become fully functional digital language embedded in AI. Yoruba cities might emerge as global exemplars of sustainable urban development. Strengthened versions for Esusu and other traditional systems could become viable templates for inclusive community-driven economics. Let me bring you finally in 1530 Portuguese explorer before the fortified majesty of Ijebu-Ode, a Yoruba city, already 4 centuries old. He witnessed not a tribal outpost, but a civilization built on order, innovation, and collective vision. Today, we must ask a parallel question. What will observers see when they look upon Yoruba in 2050 or 2100? The answer depends entirely on the choices of your generation. Your generation carries a strategic imperative to transform every challenge into a platform of innovation grounded in cultural excellence. Let the world see that Yoruba is not a relic of the compact future. Let your innovation build systems with that shares prosperity. Remember, our ancestors built cities when others built villages. Our foremothers pioneered financial systems. Our leaders upheld justice. Now it is your turn. Your turn to rise. Turn every challenge into opportunity. Let your solutions serve both your people and humanity. Our ancestors laid the foundations. Make your vision be bold. May your diligence. And may the legacy you leave honor our ancestors while empowering our descendants. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Please give him a